morning, good evening, or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world and at what time you've come across this video here. I'm going to keep it nice and short and make it very, very clear. To all those people who are sick of the Rona, been 2 years now of absolute liberty taking, and a lot of the lies are starting to fall apart. Though, don't worry, they're going to be propped up by other things, and the key people who are going to be propping up the next wave of lies to come in our direction, the next schools of fear, is going to be, our media. So we're going to take a little, just a very, very quick look at all the rubbish, because I step out of my house, doesn't actually seem like anything's going on, to be very honest. Seems like a normal day, except for fellows walking around with mask on their face, or the odd twat in their vehicle driving with a mask on their face, on their nibbles. Other than that, life seems pretty normal. People going to work in the morning, coming from work in the evening, taking the kids to school, going about their everyday lives, doing their shopping. Things seem quite ordinary, to be very honest. As a matter of fact, if we had got rid of the media, printed press, digital press, press in general, I reckon we'd be good. We'd be good. It'll be done and dusted. But the reason it's not done and dusted, because of these what we call the media, which are a medium. That's all the media is, a medium between somebody and somebody else, or big tech corporations, skanking, conniving governments, and what they consider the little folk below. So let's have a little look at this. I come across this term, yellow journalism. Now, let me just read it to you, yeah? And let me just read it out. It says, yellow journalism and yellow press are American terms for journalism, and associated newspapers represent little or no legitimate, well-researched news, while instead using eye-catching headlines for increased sales. I'm going to read that again. Associated newspapers represent little or no legitimate, well-researched news, while instead using eye-catching headlines for increased sales. Now, as I'm talking away here, there's articles coming up beside me of all these headline-grabbing news articles. One of them I'm going to pick out. Yeah? I'm going to use one as an example. Yeah? But before we do, it says, techniques may include exaggerations of news events, scandal mongering or sensationalism. By extension, the term yellow journalism is used today as a pejorative to decry any journalism that treats news in an unprofessional or unethical fashion. Now, Wikipedia is great for giving you a basic on information, but it's not the be-all and end-all, yeah? Because they're as slanted as any other media source. They're definitely slanted in regards. So they've had to throw that in there. By extension, the term yellow journalism is used today as a pejorative to decry any journalism that treats news in an unprofessional or unethical fashion. Hence, what we're getting nowadays on the news. In English, the term is chiefly used in the US. In the UK, its roughly equivalent term is tabloid journalism, meaning journalism characteristic of tabloid newspapers, even if found elsewhere. Make it clear, even if found elsewhere, because you've got these big boy newspapers who are always recognised as not being tabloid, such as the Times and the Observer and such papers, but they've become, under the Rona, tabloid newspapers, practicing yellow journalism. And we know that because there just seems to be one view coming out. So these people need to be, you know, when it comes to the hangings and the various other forms of how we're going to deal with these folk in due time, these people need to be up for the chop as well. You know, the guillotine is going to be necessary for these people. A common source of such writing is called checkbook journalism, which is the controversial practice of news reporters paying sources for their information without verifying its truth or accuracy. In some countries, it is considered unethical by mainstream media outlets. In contrast, tabloid newspapers and tabloid television shows, which rely more on sensationalism, regularly engage in the practice. Now, that's media paying for stories. And we've seen it. But what about when the media is paid to provide stories? That is something which I haven't seen anything, can't see anything here in regards to that. Can't see anything on that in regards to that. Frank Lufamot identifies yellow journalism based on 5 characteristics. Scare headlines in huge print, often of minor news. Lavish use of pictures or imaginary drawings. Use of faked interviews. Misleading headlines. Pseudoscience. And a parade of false learning from so-called experts. A parade of false learning from so-called experts. For the past 2 years, all I've seen is so-called experts. No credentials. No investigative who this person is. Every article will be doctor says, professor of this says. So, who are these people? Yeah? But this is the news, what we're getting. Emphasis on full-colour Sunday supplements, usually with comic strips, and dramatic sympathy with the underdog against the system. Now, in this case, the underdog seems to be the let's jabba dabba ding dong everyone massive. That seems to be the underdog, and the system, who it seems to be going against, seems to be general people living their everyday lives, wanting to go back to what's called normal. Not a new normal, just normal. So, yellow journalism. Do you think that's what we're undertaking at the moment? Do you think that's what we're having? And just before I slip off, let's go and have a look at our trusted, because it doesn't mention, one thing it doesn't seem to mention here is the funding of newspapers, or the funding of the media. The media used to pay for silly stories. Now the media are paid to provide silly stories. So let's have a look and see where some of their money comes from. Yeah, because we assume the money comes from, I go in the shop, I buy the paper, with the money the papers are making. Therefore, that allows them to pay their staff and pay all their costs and keeps it moving. But no, especially since the coming of the internet, obviously, newspapers were starting to lose massive profits. Let's have a look here. Let's have a look. There's an article here from The Guardian, yeah, and it says, UK national newspapers sales plummet under COVID-19 lockdown. Yeah. Now, newspaper sales were plummeting anyway, due to the fact of the internet and people get their news alternatively from other forms. So they was being stuck for money. And don't forget, these have been institutions, people been getting their bread and butter out of these companies for years. Yeah, they've been making millions. You know, these are news corporations. Yeah. But they was having a problem because print sales were going out the window. Hence, the Metro giving it out for free. The Standard became a paper that you used to pay for, started being given out for free because I don't have to buy it. Well, I can get stories all day long just coming up on my feed. I can actually go to Facebook for a story if I really wanted to, as people do. It's where most people are getting their strange news from. So, it says, fears for jobs as print sales drop as much as 30% after thousands of newsagents close. National print newspaper sales have fallen by as much as 30% since the start of the government-ordered coronavirus lockdown, according to industry sources. With journalists as many local newspapers placed on leave and warnings that hundreds of reporters could be left without jobs as the advertising market collapses. Thousands of independent newsagents have closed, commuter traffic is non-existent, and supermarkets are expected to cut the numbers of copies they take from next week because of reduced footfall. With many readers also self-isolating, one of the British news industry's main sources of revenue has taken a heavy hit. Organisations representing national newspapers have even had to promote guidance from the World Health Organization that newsprint does not pose a transmission risk. Yeah, because don't forget we could get the Rona off everything. It reminded you like back in the AIDS, didn't it? They said you could sit down on the toilet, you can get AIDS from somebody else. You know, all the hype what came out with it, and then we figure out after, well, it's not really that. So these papers were losing money. So who's funding them? Because they're still around. They're still printing. Yeah, and you've got all these little media companies, journalists who can't get into the big companies now because the big companies are just not as big as they used to be, are starting up their own stuff. And who funds these little people? Who funds BuzzFeed, for example? Yeah, have you ever looked who funds BuzzFeed? So when these people are taking articles, they're taking them sometimes from other articles. These smaller little reporters. And who's paying for their costs? And how do they get their viewership? Using the same form of yellow journalism. So let's have a look where the big bad boys of media, like the BBC, let's have a look where they get their dough from. Yeah. Now, if you type in, what did I type in? If you type in something as simple as BBC funding, where does BBC funding come from? I found a site by the BBC, Media Action. It says where our money comes from. USA Aid, the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Can't understand why they're putting money in, but hey. UK Foreign and Commonwealth, Swedish International Development, the European Union, UK Department for International Development, United Nations Development Programme, Global Affairs Canada, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Now, don't you think these people should be scrutinised? It's a bit like lobbying, isn't it? It's like, if I'm giving you money and I'm paying you, I'm not doing it out of love. Is anyone asking any questions? But the money, it says where our money comes from. Is that just provided out of love? Is that just provided because I just want to help the newspaper? Or is it like in any case, well, I'll give you a bit of dough and you're going to sell my stories. I'm going to give you stories and you are going to produce them. This is something that thinking people really need to look into. Yeah? Because trust me, even though it seems at the moment, because it's all crumbling, so the media are going to pretend, yep, they're going to pretend that they're on your side. And they're going to start running stories which seems like they're questioning the establishment. While in the meantime, the same people whose little falsehood of lies is starting to crumble, those same people at this present moment are already figuring out the next variant. Or even better, the next form of disease. And they're going to be running back to the same peddlers, the same medium, the same middlemen to peddle the story. So all those people said, well, I trust the BBC and I'm watching trusted sources and I trust what I get off the news. And you people are just getting your news off of YouTube and getting your TV off the internet. And by the way, I'm on BBC on the internet. I mean, it's an absolutely stupid argument because most channels now have an online presence, just like most shops have an online presence. Like, there's nothing wrong with going to find your news online. It's just very convenient. It's the same news you're going to get on your box. As a matter of fact, there's going to be a lot more news because other people who can't afford to go the route of the box can still now provide media. Your job is to question them. Your job, anyone puts up an article, go and find out where they studied, why they studied it, whom is funding them, the whole nine, before you go around running it in people's mouths and quoting it. It's dodgy as they come. It's as corrupt as your government. They're all in it. They're all in cahoots together. And if you haven't figured it out because you refuse to take a quick look, then, as I said, go and take a look at what yellow journalism is, or tabloid media. Yeah, but I prefer the term yellow journalism because the media are supposed to be journalists, and they're not doing journalistic work at all. They're doing scare headlines in huge print, lavish use of pictures, use of faked interviews, misleading headlines, pseudoscience being portrayed as the science. You know them people like, you don't trust the science. Yet, many of these so-called sciences, like Fauci, for example, he's in front of the Senate on a daily basis in regards to his pseudoscience. And remember this one key thing here, where it says, associated newspapers represent little or no legitimate, well-researched news, while instead using eye-catching headlines for increased sales. For increased sales. They're all on the gravy train. Except you. With that, I very angrily sign off, because it's a big disrespect to media. And bring back the likes of John Pilger. Let's bring back some real investigative journalists. And let's bring back some media where you can say something without a dodgy fact check, which is nothing than an opinion, at the bottom of everything you post, where your stuff isn't taken down. This is not media. This is yellow journalism. Peace.